Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the third workshop in our series of US academic job workshops from Plant Postdocs. Today we have the workshop on teaching and diversity statement. And before I go into the details of today's workshop, we'll just talk a little bit about the Plant Postdocs program. So let me share my screen first. Okay, so today's workshop is sponsored by Plant Postdocs, and Plant Postdocs is an organization I founded with Arif Ashraf, who is an assistant professor at Howard University. So the idea was to bring together postdocs working in plant science related field to help each other in our pursuit of next career goal. So we all have a Slack channel and social media networks to try to get together and help each other in preparing our application material for jobs in industry, academia, and the government. So we have a group of volunteers who are helping us with these. So we are trying to provide as many resources as possible for the postdocs. So as I mentioned, we have a strong Twitter followers, and then we post most of the job ads and our activities on our Twitter channel here. And then we have webinars regularly. We used to have 2 webinars each semester, one for academic jobs and other for industry and government jobs. And then we expanded into writing workshops and the current workshop, which is looking at how to prepare application material for tenure track academic jobs. So most of these workshops and webinars we have are all recorded, and then you can watch the recorded sessions in our YouTube channel shown here. And then along with that, we are also creating many resources. For example, we have what is called the 3PRD, which is basically a reviewer database or peer reviewer database for all the plant journals. So postdocs and graduate students can put in their information in these spreadsheet that we have, and we routinely send it out to plant journals so that they can invite you for peer reviewing purposes. And then, as I mentioned, most of our interactions also happen in Slack channel, where we can discuss things about application material or even talking about research challenges or questions. We also have good presence in the WeChat channel, trying to collaborate with folks working in China and other countries. And we have a very vibrant group in the WeChat as well. So most of the social media and other things we have posted here on our website, or you can go to our Twitter and find out these different things that we do. And as I mentioned, a lot of volunteers help us in getting these work done. So I want to just acknowledge the people in the leadership team, particularly the chair of the leadership team, Ariana, and Jaspreet, Lise, Asif, and Yuchen. And then we also have Plant Postdoc Advisory Board members, including faculty from different universities across US and from South America, and as well as folks from the industry as well. So we try to have a very broad perspective. So currently we are providing more information on US academic jobs, but we are also expanding into jobs in industry and government. So we have advisory board members who work in the industry and giving us inputs on how we can develop resources that will be helpful for postdocs to get a career in industry and government jobs as well. So in this series, we are trying to have a broad perspective of trying to understand how to develop our application material. So we already had 2 workshops, one on developing research statement and on how to create your cover letters for US academic jobs. And today we'll be having the workshop on teaching and diversity statement. And then finally next week at 2 p.m. on Thursday next week, we will have another workshop on research and chalk talk. So the advertisement for that will come out tomorrow on Twitter. Jose Dini will be talking about the research and chalk talk next week. Again, it's at 2 p.m. instead of 4 p.m. So please register once we have this out in the Twitter. But today, we are going to talk about the teaching and diversity statements. And we are honored to have Professor Savinj Erkan, who is a professor in the department in the Center for Genomics and Systems Biology at New York University. She did her PhD in Penn State University and a postdoc in University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Her lab at New York University works on X chromosome inactivation in C. elegans. And among the many awards Savinj has won for her research, she is also honored with the 2022 NYU College of Arts and Science Golden Dozen Teaching Award. She is also the faculty director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and she has served on the New York University Biology Faculty Search Committee since 2011, and she co-chaired the search committee in molecular cell and organismal biology in 2021 and 2022. So she has vast experiences in looking at applications with teaching and diversity statements. So I think it'll be very good to have her talk about how do we craft the research and teaching statement. And a fun fact about Savinj is she's a supporter of graduate students and postdocs. And we recently we played ping pong, and I partnered with her and won second place in the biology ping pong tournament. And with that, I welcome Savinj and let her talk about how to craft research, how to craft teaching and diversity statement for U.S. tenure track positions.
Thank you, Sunil. All right, so I prepared a few slides to share with you, but what I want to do actually is I'm going to open the chat and put the chat box on the side. What I want to do is I'm going to ask you all questions during my presentation, and I would love if you put your answers in the chat, and I'll try to monitor the chat as much as I can. Also, if you have private questions that you're not comfortable for everyone to see, you can directly message me in the chat, and I'll try to rephrase it so that I can answer it for everyone, okay? All right, so let's start with the teaching and diversity statements. And I'm going to actually start with the teaching statement. Teaching statements has been around for a very long time, so there's a lot of material online, and you might have an easier time getting examples and thinking about it than diversity statements. So I'm going to try and go through the teaching statement a little bit faster. All right, and like I said, during the talk, if you have questions, put it in the chat as well, okay? All right, so the perspective of the teaching statement that I have is going to be very NYU based. I have not been in research search committees in other places. How does NYU biology looks like? Basically, we're about 45 or so faculty, with about 30 of them tenure track, and about 10 of them teaching faculty, 10, 15 of them. We are an undergraduate institution, so we do teach. However, our teaching load is much less than some of the other institutions that might have a lot more teaching focus. We teach about one and a half course per year. So teaching is a part of our job, but research is definitely a heavier part of our job at NYU Biology. So that is the perspective that I come from. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to actually start with a slide where I'm stating two points that we have in our rubric for assessing teaching statements. And one is that the candidate needs to demonstrate an interest in teaching. And the other one that is kind of important is that the candidate demonstrates an interest in interactive and engaging and modern approaches to teach. Okay, so these are the 2 points that we have. And next, what I'm going to do is go through what a typical teaching statement should have. In your teaching statement, you should address the following points. You should talk about your teaching philosophy, teaching experience, any professional development that you have done in the past around teaching, and your teaching plan. So next, I'm going to go through each of these points, okay? All right. So what does teaching philosophy actually mean? Teaching philosophy is like how you think about teaching, how you think learning occurs, how you think, what is your role as a teacher, what are some of the methods and strategies you think will be effective, how will you assess learning of your students, how do you bring your own research to teaching, and how do you teach a diverse student body, promote inclusion, and have equitable practices. So here's one pause I'm going to make and ask you to put your ideas in the chat. What would be your philosophy? What is something that you think is really important to you? For example, how do you think learning occurs, and what is your role as a teacher? So go ahead and put it in the chat, and I'll take a look. So think about what's really important to you in teaching. For example, one of the things that is really important to me is to I think that learning occurs when the student directly engages in the material to solve problems. For example, when I was teaching molecular cell biology, one thing that I did was to update a lot of our recitations so that it was basically a lot of worksheet in solving problems. For example, I don't believe a student can learn how to design a primer until they can actually hand design the primer, looking at the sequence, looking at the complementary bases, etc. So that's one of my philosophies, is that I need the students learn through engaging actively with the material. So what are some of your philosophies in teaching? Interactions with the students, I think, is very important. If you give a long lecture, everybody's going to be asleep after 20 minutes, right? So effective teaching requires a lot of interactions. Relate learning to students' interest. That is definitely important. You will assume that students coming in, taking your class, are interested in your material, but if you make it more relevant to their daily lives or their current interests, knowing your audience is going to allow you to pick better examples and things like that. Giving room for mistakes, that's a great one. I always tell my students in the lab and outside, there's only one way to learn, and that's the hard way, because we learn through making mistakes. It's very difficult if you never make any mistakes to learn something, right? Facilitate access to information, promote problem solving while providing room for engagement on the subject material. That's very nice summary of teaching philosophy. Making students think about the topic deeply instead of just understanding. Hands-on activities like drawing anatomical structure. That's exactly, I love that. Whenever I'm thinking, I draw a lot, and I actually demonstrate that to my students. So what I do is I use my iPad, and I project the iPad to the screen, and I draw it. For example, I draw a line, I put a little arrow and say, this is the gene. And then I say the TBP, tau binding protein, comes into the promoter, and then that brings the polymerase, etc. And that drawing helps them see, oh, okay, that's how she is summarizing. And I tell them, go home and do it the same way and see if you can put it down. Knowing your audience and prepare your courses accordingly. Exactly. So these are some of great examples, and that's something that you're going to put in when you're explaining your philosophy. What are some of the things that are important to you? What are some of the things that you think helps students learn? All right, the second is teaching experience, and that could be a little bit more straightforward, right? So you would have some experience as a teaching assistant during graduate school, typically. You might have given full or partial courses or guest lectures, might have done a workshop, teaching. So I know that a lot of postdocs don't have teaching experience, and we are aware of this. This is not a big problem at all at NYU Biology, because at NYU Biology, we don't expect you coming in with a lot of experience. Some of the things that we look at in the teaching statements is, for example, you're teaching at the bench. If you thought how to do experiments, go through protocols with the undergraduates, you can actually explain what was it that you did that worked for you. How did you engage the undergraduates? So mentoring undergraduates, teaching them at the bench also counts. And then connecting these experiences to your philosophy or future plans will be great as well. Okay, any questions about teaching experience? That's probably the straightforward part of the statement. Okay, so this is professional development. So what do I mean by that? I mean, during your postdoc, when you are thinking about applying to academic jobs, maybe you thought you looked for some experience, or you looked for programs that would prepare you. If you're in large universities, usually these universities will have faculty development programs that will involve teaching workshops that are available to us. I go to them once in a while around topics. And sometimes you can take a workshop that is basically geared towards preparing postdocs, teaching from postdoc offices, right? So take these opportunities, and if you take them, you should put them here and say, I am serious about being a teacher, being a better teacher, and learning new things. And here's what I've done towards that. All right, so next is the teaching plan. It is always a good idea to take a look at the department that you're applying. What kind of teaching do they do? What kind of curriculum do they have? Look at some of the undergraduate and graduate courses, and see, for example, is there something new that you can bring in that you think would be great for this department, right? So that could be something that you can highlight specifically for a given department. If you really want to, for example, your top choices, right? It's really important in the teaching plan what you would like to teach and what would make you excited to teach. So in addition to subject, right? So for example, if you're a plant postdoc, you're going to say, oh, I would love to teach plant biology, something like that, right? But not just the subject. Think about the courses that you might teach. For example, you might be a natural teacher, very outgoing, and you might love to teach a large introductory course. And if that's the case, you should state that. You can say, I think the influence of teachers in introductory courses are great in channeling the students' career progression, right? And I want to be one of those, right? You can say that I aspire to be a role model and would like to teach a course like that. You could say that I'm really interested in teaching PhD students a certain skill that you think is really important for the future. And you might say that. You can say, I see that a lot of students need to do genomic analysis, and I would love to teach a course on genomics, right? Something like this. So are you excited about developing a new course? It's basically kind of what I was saying. So that said, which you should have a plan and present it, in a lot of the cases when you join a department, your teaching plans need to align with the needs of the department. So don't restrict yourself too much in the subject and course size, etc. Because in a lot of cases, we don't get to teach exactly what we're an expert in, right? We have to kind of like educate ourselves, read the textbook, and teach whatever is necessary. So it would be a good idea to say that you would work with the department and fill whatever the needs might be, right? Okay. Any questions about the teaching plan? All right. So now let's overview what the teaching statement should look like. For NYU biology, our teaching statements, what we expect is about 1 page, and that's pretty standard. A lot longer than that or a lot shorter than that will stick out, but so shoot for 1 page, okay? And use a format that doesn't look like a block of text. Just because we are expecting a 1-page statement doesn't mean it should be like completely filled. So have space in there a little bit, so that it's visually kind of inviting and not scaring. Because we would be reading lots of these, right? So you want it to be as easy to the reader as possible. Typically, these are 4 or 5 paragraphs, and each paragraph should have a topic sentence and a final sentence. So if your philosophy starts with, okay, I think that learning occurs through active engagement, you should kind of wrap up that paragraph by wrapping up what you said for the philosophy, etc. It should be personal and thoughtful. What do I mean by that? So when I say personal, it's not just all your personal experiences, etc., but that we actually want to see what is important to you. So that's kind of what I mean by personal. And some of the common mistakes, for example, that we see in teaching statements is being vague and general. For example, a person would start the teaching statement, the role of a teacher is very important in learning. I've taken, you can say something like, effective lectures are important, right? Making a lot of these kind of general statements is not very good. What do I mean by vague? For example, you can say in your plan, I'm going to promote active learning. But what do you mean by that? What is active learning to you, right? Is it providing workshops? Is it providing problem sets? What does that mean, active learning? Are you going to do flip lectures, right? Are you going to engage through videos? So it's kind of what you mean, that you want to be a little bit specific. How do you find material that has examples of newer and effective methods of teaching? That's exactly so you can find these materials through your office of postdocs office and faculty development pages in your universities or elsewhere. And faculty development workshops are also typically open to the postdocs. So you're gonna need to search a little bit. All right. So what do I mean by newer and effective methods of teaching? Okay, so most of you are younger than me, so you've been exposed to some of the better teaching probably. But what's the classical way of teaching? Does anyone know? When you think of teaching or taking a course in the university, what do you think of? What comes to your mind? Put it in the meeting chat. Let's see what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Sitting there and getting lecture, that is exactly what comes to your mind, right? And we know that's not effective at all. So why do we keep doing this, right? It's very ineffective. So that's kind of what I mean, is that if you say, oh, I'm going to prepare 14 lectures of 50 minutes each and then give 2 midterms and a final, I'm going to say, okay, this person is going to exactly replicate how they were taught, right? But it's not necessarily the best practices of teaching. The other mistake is neglecting what you would be excited to teach. So you never say anything about that, or not showing an interest. We get teaching statements like that, which is really, really surprising. So you should say that you want to teach if you're sending your application to a teaching institution. All right. Any questions about teaching? Because I'm going to switch to diversity right away. No, we do not expect any specific course numbers from the department, but you can name subjects, right? So you can say, my PhD was in cell biology, so I would be prepared to teach an undergraduate or graduate course of cell biology. Something like that is totally fine, but we do not expect course numbers at all. That's too much detail. All right, any other questions? All right, if not, we're going to move on to diversity statements. Okay, so first, let's think about why the institutions are asking letter of support indicating teaching experience. No, we do not expect a letter of support indicating teaching experience. If that's something extensive that you have done, maybe you can ask one of your letter writers to make a comment on how great of a teacher you were. For example, we do get those kind of comments in recommendation letters about mentoring undergraduates. So that's something important if that's the type of teaching that you have done. If your PI comments on that, that would be good. All right. So why are institutions asking for DI statements? Here is the text that I took from the NYU website asking for diversity statements. And this is because a lot of US institutions have recognized that diversity is important for academia, for the success of academia, for creativity, for the type of research that we do, and they want to increase diversity. The second thing is that in US institutions, we typically teach a very diverse body of students, right? And coming in and trying to teach these students, you should understand some of the issues and what that means in terms of trying to teach. For teaching positions, is it generally preferred to have a postdoc experience? So for our faculty searches, we almost always require postdoc experience, but that's more, I think, field specific than anything else. All right, so let's go to diversity statements. So one of the leaders in this diversity statements is the University of California system, okay? They do have a lot of extensive materials where you can look at some of the information, the rationale, and some of the definitions that you might actually want to read about, all right? And most importantly, you can look at how they evaluate these diversity statements, because when you look at how something is being evaluated, that's going to teach you how you should be writing your statement. All right, so this is from Berkeley evaluation, and they have basically 3 main points, which is very similar to what we practice here at NYU. One is to assess the knowledge and understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, a track record of activities in this area, and plans for how that person can contribute to the institution that they apply to. All right, so let's go through this. So one is knowledge and understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion. This is basically a responsibility of the person who's applying for these jobs, right? And some of and how you're going to do this is basically how we do research, right? Is basically looking for some of this information online and the resources that exist in your institutions. All right, so how do we assess standard knowledge? One is to kind of look for how you are explaining, for example, what diversity means to you or commenting on it. So what does diversity mean in terms of the meaning of the word? So go ahead, put it in the chat what you think diversity means. What's the meaning of the word diversity? Is diversity a property of a single person? Can diversity be a property of a single person, or is diversity a property of a population? Can a person be diversity? Can I say you are a diverse person? If you say yes, put a 1 in the chat. If you say no, put a 2. Can a person be diverse? Can I say, Sunil, you're very diverse? Yeah, diversity is a property of a population. It's not just of one person. So we can't really call a person diversity person, right? Or a diverse person. Diversity refers to the types and kinds of people in a population, for example, in the university, right? So diversity of the student body is what you can refer to. And the diversity can apply to different factors can be diverse, could be counted, right? Like as diversity. So go ahead on the chat and put in what are some of the things that be the properties of people that you can look in the diversity of a population. Ethnicity, scientific background, traits and abilities, skills and thoughts, race is one. Parents' education, definitely, right? Economic status, educational background. That's right. So there could be a lot of different angles of diversity that we're talking about. All right. So diversity is just not one thing, right? So that's what we mean by that. So why do institutions want to increase diversity? The reason is basically twofold. One is that a lot of research has shown that a diverse group of people function better, right? So they bring different perspectives, different types of creativity, different ideas to the table. And academia has really suffered from not having that kind of diversity. So the universities want to increase the diversity of the faculty and students so that we can be more effective. There are a lot of angles to this, okay? And there are other factors, for example, one of the bigger reasons of trying to diversify the faculty is that a lot of students would like to see a role model or what's possible for them and to start the academic track, right? So that's one of the reasons that universities want to hire a diverse body of faculty. And universities want the faculty to be able to teach a diverse body of students, right? To understand and relate and make sure that your practices are supporting the diversity of the students. The second reason is that we think that everyone should have an opportunity to enter academic track, right? That we love to do science, we love to do teaching, we want to be in academia, and we want everyone to have an equal chance for getting in, right? So we want to support the practices that is going to accomplish that. All right, so that's the reason a lot of institutions want to increase diversity. There are other reasons that I did not mention. Okay, what's the difference between equality and equity? So think about what you think is equality and equity mean, and think about how you give exams, for example. So what does equality and equity mean to you? Does anybody want to put it in the chat? What does equality mean in terms of giving exams? You give the same exam to everybody. That's equality, right? You're treating everybody equal, right? Yes, equity brings everyone to the same level of equality. So, for example, you give exams and you give it a written exam, right, to everybody. That's treating everyone equal. But let's say that you have a disabled person who is not able to read, right? And then this person, even though you're treating everybody equal, this person doesn't have a chance to do well in that exam, right? So this is kind of an extreme example, but that's what I mean by practices of equity, is that to understand that there might be differences in your student population so that you know to do some of these things. For example, in Zoom recordings, you can do subtitles, right, for a person who might have a hard of hearing, right? So that's kind of the type of things that you should be kind of aware of. Same thing for when you're doing research, you're making figures. For example, you don't put red and green right next to each other because a sizable population is not going to be able to distinguish, right? So those are some of the things that you should think about. And there are lots of definitions and examples of this online as well. So this is something that you can look into a little bit. And below here is a link to one of the probably early articles that came out about diversity in academia. I think it's from 2014, something like that. That was very directed to molecular cell biology kind of fields, and that's how I got to read it. So that's a good place to start for you as well, if that's what you think that you would like to do. All right. So the next kind of concept here is inclusion and belonging. Okay. So again, let's go to the chat. And here's the question. What's the difference between inclusion and belonging? And think about how you interact with students in the classroom. How do you include students, for example, in a discussion? What are some of the inclusive practices that you can do in your teaching, in your research? You can ask questions. That might not guarantee that every student is going to feel included, and right, so having things that they can associate and relate with, that's one strategy. Everyone is inclusion, and means everyone is invited to participate, while belonging means everyone feels they are a part. That's perfect definition. I couldn't have said it better. Small group discussions where everyone needs to talk, right? So you can facilitate these talking. Voting is another way I do a lot of polls for this reason. And belonging is a feeling. That's something that you cultivate by inclusion, right? And in terms of your laboratories, an inclusion would be you could seek out a diverse trainee, right? A diverse set of trainees in your lab, right? For example, a lot of young faculty are going to be asked to organize the departmental seminars, right? So when you're inviting people, you can take a look at the who are the type of people that we're inviting, right? Take a look at the list and say, okay, are we really doing a good job representing the people in that field, right? So these are some of the things that you can do and you can suggest that you can do. All right, very good. All right, track record of activities to date. This is probably a little bit easier for everyone to think about. So why don't you all put in the chat, what are some of the activities that you can list when you're writing your diversity statements, your contributions? Okay, you all are working on your diversity statement. So what do you put there that you've done? What are some of the things that you've done as a postdoc in the past that could show that you are working? Undergrad mentoring for underrepresented minorities, that's exactly one of the things. For example, there are lots of summer programs, right, geared towards this. If you participated in one, you can elaborate. If you haven't, you should, right? Train students from a variety of backgrounds, that's right. So if you've taken undergrads, hopefully you've taken different different undergrads. Accommodations for neurodivergences, absolutely. If there's something that you've done in the lab to accommodate them, you can definitely put that in. Yeah, so there is, and if you taught a course, right, that is what did you do that promoted inclusion in the classroom? What did you do that promoted equity in assessments, right? So these are some of the things that you can actually put in. If you do field work, for example, how do you engage with the local people, right? There's a lot of things that you can think about. All right, so plans for contributing at the institutions that you applied to, we kind of went through this. Well, basically, you can put in your plans, in your diversity statement for different aspects of your job. And a faculty job could be probably grouped into three. One is teaching, one is research, and the other one is service. Okay, so for teaching, we spent a little bit of time on this. So some of the things that you can do to make an inclusive classroom, to increase the feelings of belonging, have equitable practices. And for example, for us who teach genetics, right, or molecular biology, how do we teach this? How do we teach anti-racist science? So what do I mean by that? Okay. For example, racism uses a lot of ideas from genetics and evolution, right? So, and the way that we teach these contribute to some of these incorrect ideas of how genetics and evolution works. For example, one of the famous kind of cliches that people use while teaching is our genes make up who we are. Is that really true? Our genes are really make up who we are, right? And a lot of the examples that we use teaching genetics and molecular biology, genome-wide association studies, for example, focus on one gene, one phenotype, right? And that gives the students a perspective of whatever the DNA sequence is going to be, it's going to determine, right? So this is called kind of genetic determinism, which is very heavy in our curriculum, it's very heavy in our textbooks. So one of the ways that you can combat this is providing examples where there is not a very straight line between a genotype to a phenotype, right? For example, when I'm teaching molecular cell biology, I use a mouse genetic mutant where every mouse has exactly the same genotype coming out of the same colony, right? But they have a different set of phenotypes. And these phenotypes are in limb development, so it's very striking, the differences. And that kind of is to kind of subconsciously combat some of these ideas that racist, how science can actually foster racism as well, right? So these are some of the things that you can think about in terms of teaching. Any questions about this? Any other ideas that could be a plan for promoting diversity, equity, inclusion in teaching? I'm also open to ideas, right? I get ideas from other people when I talk about it. So that's why I'm asking. All right, so let's go to research. This could be mentoring students, seeking students from diverse backgrounds. Another important thing, take a look at what kind of programs are in the departments that you're applying. For example, at Department of Biology, we have a summer undergraduate research program that's geared towards undergrads from that are underrepresented in STEM fields, right? So if you were applying to NYU Biology, you can say, you know, I've noticed that you have a summer program. I'd be excited to host a student in this program, right? So that could be one of the plans. What about your collaborations? Do you always collaborate with a certain type of people, right? Or do you kind of have a wide range of collaborations that you can establish? Organizing meetings. When you organize meetings, who do you invite to, right? To these meetings. That's some of the ways that you can promote diversity in research. All right, any other ways you can use your research for as any research plans that you could bring into a department? If you have any other ideas, definitely you can put that in. All right, and the third component of our jobs is service. And service, we see it for our institution, for our department, and outside the institution as well. Okay, and so this could be outreach, this could be conferences, and this also could be educating oneself, right? One way that you can actually learn about these issues is educating yourself by being aware of these issues, taking opportunities to learn more. There are always workshops and talks in universities around these issues. So why don't you go and contribute and attend to these events, right? And one thing that's kind of important for teaching and research is to have a little bit of cultural competence, right? As we get older, the students, we have a joke saying students get younger and younger. So what that means is that you kind of have to try to stay in touch with some of the changing ideas and culture in general. All right, any questions about plants? While you're thinking about your questions, I'm gonna kind of summarize. So here's how a diversity statement is gonna look like. Very similar to a teaching statement, okay? It's gonna be one page again in an inviting format that's not intimidating. 45 paragraphs with a little bit of space in between. I kind of emphasize topic sentence and final sentence for the reason that there's going to be a lot of applications coming in for a single position, and there's going to be some skimming of these statements, okay? Not everyone is going to read them very carefully. So what you want to kind of capture is the reader's attention. And the reader is going to expect a topic sentence, and they might skim and read the summary sentence at the end of a paragraph. So if you don't give it to them, it's going to be hard for them to understand what you just said, right? Again, the diversity statement should be personal and thoughtful. All right. Some common mistakes being vague and general. For example, a lot of kind of sentences that say diversity is important, inclusion is important, right? Without elaborating. That is not very good. All right. So not understanding key concepts like calling people diverse is kind of a one of those things that kind of shows that. The other, probably, I wouldn't call it completely negative, but one thing that I see a lot in diversity statements that are not very good is that only one aspect of diversity is highlighted. And usually it's the one that applies to you. And I think this comes from the recommendation that the diversity statement should be personal. That doesn't mean that it's only about what distinguishes you as an individual. Okay, so don't just focus on the aspect that applies to you, but also about other people. Okay, so when I say other people, is the diversity of your students, the diversity of your mentees, and what are some of the ways that they could bring diversity, right? So try to make your statement not just focusing on one type of diversity, okay? So if I want to be more specific about that, for example, it is totally okay to use personal examples, like I am the first one in my family who has gone to college, so I will have a better understanding of some of the challenges that students might face who are first gen, right? And you can say, I noticed that NYU, you have a program called faculty, I can't remember the name of the program now, but there's a program for first-gen students, and I'd be excited to be part of this program, right? So this is totally good. That's very nice. You're bringing your own experience to the table, okay? But we can also empathize without having gone through that kind of experience, right? So you can talk about racial diversity, you could talk about economic diversity, you could talk about other types of diversities that doesn't immediately apply to you as well, right? That's kind of what I mean. All right, and the fourth one, which I typically encounter, is statements that read like a pledge, which is or a statement of facts, right? So these come out a little bit odd. And so try to get some feedback on your statements and make sure that it reads personal and thoughtful rather than a statement of facts and a pledge. All right. Is it allowed to highlight in bold some parts of the statement for quick eye to catch? Absolutely. People do this a lot. For example, if you have a very strong track record in something that you want the skimmer not to skip, definitely bold it or italicize or underline it. Definitely, you can use tricks like that. All right, any questions? Because that is all I have. Can there be overlap between the teaching statement and DEI statement? For example, taking classes, workshops on DEI in the classroom. If so, is it suggested? There will be definitely overlap between teaching and DEI statements, but it is, I would recommend you not to have blocks of text that are exactly the same. For example, in your teaching statement, let's say that you have a lot of experience, you need the room in your teaching statement. What you can say is that finally, in teaching, I pay attention to the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and will use equitable, inclusive practices in my classroom, which are detailed in my diversity statement, right? Let's say you have a lot to say in the diversity statement. You can say, I apply a lot of these principles in my teaching as summarized in my teaching statement. You know what I mean? So you basically, you overlap a little bit, but you put the body of the text in one or the other statement, not in both. It shouldn't repeat. All right. Registration for how to address the statement if we don't have teaching experience. Teaching statement for those who haven't taught since the pandemic. So if you have teaching statement experience from before, that's okay. If you mentored an undergraduate at the bench, that's part of teaching. If you've taught in other kind of ways, we always teach something, right? So you might have taught a particular technique to a rotation student, right? So these are, of course, they're not the same as giving a lecture or organizing or coming up with a class, but you can actually use those as experience. All right. Do people count listing references to the page limit of these statements? No. References don't count at all. A lot of times what we want is the statement to be one page, and then you can have a page of references, no problem. Does science communication count towards DEI? Yes, that would be outreach, right? So that could be basically bringing your science or your point of view to a whole bunch of people. All right. Any other questions? You can directly message me if you want me to. Okay. For DI statements, is acknowledging past privileges a good or a bad idea? It depends on how you do it, right? Everyone has some privilege. Right. So nobody has no privilege. So we don't have to list every privilege that we have, because then it's going to be a lot of privileges, right? But you can bring your own experiences and point of view to your plans. Definitely, you can acknowledge it. Yeah, that's okay. But of course, you have to do it in a kind of nice way. All right. I benefited greatly from XX. Yes, absolutely. That's one way to say it. Yeah, that's a good sentence to have in your statement.
Okay. Yeah, we are on time now. So yeah, thank you so much, Savinch, for this really informative workshop. A lot of information on how to prepare both the teaching and diversity statements, both do's and don'ts. And it's helpful to hear from someone who has been on the committee and seen a lot of statements and selected good statements based on what they have written and what the committee is expecting. So thank you so much for that. And thanks everyone for attending and having a very engaging session. And also, I just want to remind you, next week we have another workshop on how to prepare your research and chalk talk. This is for people who get selected for the second round of interviews in academic positions. So that will be at 2 p.m. Thursday, and we will we'll share the registration form on Twitter. And yeah, thanks for attending, and thanks Savinch once again. Thanks for Ariana and Arif for helping us. Thank you.
Good luck, everyone. Cross fingers for all of you.